Hello, everybody, and welcome back to TTRPG Talk. This is our ongoing live stream where we hang out and we talk about all things TTRPG and TTRPG creativity every Wednesday. So I'm your host, RJ and today I wanted to talk about writer's block, actually, and specifically what you do about writer's block. Writer's block is a thing that I think that pretty much every writer, and by writer I mean every creator of TTRPG content. If you're writing TTRPG adventures, if you're doing any homebrew kind of work, if you're adding that to your DM wheelhouse, then guess what? You're a writer. Congratulations, and an artist too to boot. So woohoo, big day. Um, but I think it's something, I think that writer's block is something that every TTRPG creator is going to come across at some point during their time GMing or DMing. The kind of constant demand that DMing and GMing, depending on what TTRPG you're working with, puts on you, puts a lot of taxing energy on your sort of creative powers, and it's not uncommon or unusual for that sort of creative cup to kind of runneth dry, as it were. And so that can lead to places of stagnation where you feel like, I've got a session coming up or I want to do a new campaign, I want to play, but I don't have any ideas. And what do I do? Well, uh, one of the ways that, I should say, there are a couple ways that I like to go about tackling getting over writer's block and how to move forward and kind of refilleth that creative cup, as it were, so that it can be replenished and I can have those ideas flowing again and I can get back into the games that I love. So, my approach to tackling writer's block is, like many things, threefold. There are three things that I like to do if I'm feeling particularly kind of run down, like I'm feeling not so creative, like I'm feeling like I just don't have anything left to put in to an adventure or into something, into a project that I'm working on. And I want to go over those with you today. Now, I will say that a lot of these are not my ideas. They don't come from me originally. I got a lot of them from The Artist Way, which is a really great book about the creative process in general and sort of keeping yourself creatively fulfilled as an artist in whatever sort of medium you're using. I will say that it can get a little metaphysical. So if that's not your cup of tea, it may not be the book for you, but the techniques in here are pretty sound, and I have found that they work really, really, really well. And so I'm going to talk to you about some of my favorites. The first one is probably the most, you know, get in touch with yourself that we're going to do for this, and that is journaling. I am a big proponent of journaling if you're doing any sort of artistic endeavor, specifically TTRPGs, because there's so much of life that goes into these and so much of yourself that you can kind of draw on, you can pull from to create NPCs and to create creative locations and interesting ideas that I really, really encourage journaling as you do this. And to that end, I mean, I maintain a journal that I add to every day, and literally, it's as ideas come to me, I just kind of dog, sort of, dog ear the pages or tab the pages or what have you to let myself know that I've got something there that I might want to go back to later. But when I say journaling, I don't necessarily mean that you need to be writing philosophically or that you need to be examining every corner of your life and your existence, or that you should be journaling about TTRPGs specifically. I mean, just to journal about yourself and journal about life and journal about, who you are and what you believe and what's important to you. Because all that's going to become values that you can use for NPCs in your game. That's going to become genesis for adventures when you want to talk about, right and wrong and or amorality or what have you. It will spark your own understanding of your own beliefs that you can then put into your characters and your adventures. Journal about your interactions with other people. Um, there's nothing wrong with journaling about your time spent around other people, how that made you feel. Those interactions, were they positive, were they negative? What did they do for you? How did they leave you feeling? Because again, this gives you fodder to work with characters. It gives motivations for villains and heroes. A reason for somebody to feel slighted and maybe go down a dark path, or to feel really good about themselves and rise above their normal situation. It gives you sort of that fodder that you can take something very small, something that you may have thought was kind of insignificant that happened to you, and use that to kind of blow it up into a world scale later on to germinate something in your game. You know, let your imagination run wild while you do this. I frequently will start kind of journaling about my day, and and that will feed into an idea, and all of a sudden I'll just kind of let loose and let myself kind of run with that idea and abandon talking about myself or anything that actually happened in my journal, and just start running through sort of these what ifs and experimenting and playing on the page with this idea that sort of sparked in my mind. And that's the kind of thing that I tab or I dog ear in my journal so I can come back to later, so that when I am feeling low and like I just don't have a good idea, I can flip through those pages and I can find something that speaks to me. Um, the process of doing your journaling for this, I recommend, and the writer's way would also recommend, that you make it a daily practice. Even if you don't feel like you have anything to say, you sit down, you take the time. Even if you just write, I don't know what to say on the page over and over again, just to make it kind of a habit. The writer's way would say write 3 pages a day. I would say that if you're getting started, keep it small, write, for 5 minutes. Um, I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I sit down and I do this, I go, hey, I'm going to write for at least 10 minutes. And I've been doing this for years, and that still is, the time limit that I put on myself. And frequently I will write longer than that because I'll get into the groove and something will come to me and I'll want to talk about it on the page and I'll want to work it out. Um, but if I'm just not feeling it that day, all I got to do is spend that 10 minutes and I have achieved my goal. I can tick that box and I can put it down and I can move on. So it just becomes this habitual practice of daily putting down all this kind of stuff on the page, so that I have this chronicle of life stuff that I can go back to and draw from when I'm trying to come up with reasons for why people might be evil, or reasons for why somebody would want to take over a village, or reasons why some hero would have saved it in the past, or stuff like that. You know, there's all that human fodder and motivation in there that I can draw from and that I can put into my games, and then make them feel so much more realistic, and feel like I'm not really having to tax myself, especially in the moment, because I've got this repository that I can kind of delve back into and work with whenever I need to. So that's tip one. And if you have any questions or comments on that, any thoughts on journaling for TTRPGs and creativity, please jump in the chat. Let me know. I love to hear from everybody while we're doing this kind of stuff. But in the meantime, let me talk about item number 2, and that is get away from your desk. Get up and go somewhere else if you are feeling uncreative. And I don't necessarily mean go somewhere else and write. I mean just get up and go somewhere. Um, it's cool if you can get out and you can actually travel and go on a road trip or go somewhere that you haven't been before. That's awesome. But let's be honest, that's really not usually within the financial means and or time constraints that many of us have when we're feeling creatively low and we need that little boost. Most of us can't just jump on a plane and go, I'm going to go to the Amazon today. like and sort of get out of yourself. If you can, it's a good opportunity plan that kind of stuff throughout the year. That's really, really great. That'll help refill your creativity. But if you can't, just go outside, get out of your away from your desk, get away from your kitchen table, wherever you write this stuff. Go to a coffee shop and eavesdrop on people. I know that doesn't seem very polite, but just listen to the conversations that people have. What do they talk about? What's important to them? What is what is got the table next to you arguing and bickering? What has got the table across the cafe from you so animated? You know, listen to those things. Again, it's going to give you human fodder to deal with, like to kind of work with, to add to your creative process. It's going to give you these slices of life that animate and reinvigorate your um, your creative process here, and they may feel like small insignificant things, but again, it's just giving you that kernel that you can blow up and experiment with later and turn into something bigger and greater. um, I'm a big fan of, if you can actually go on hikes or go on nature walks. That will do a lot for you. There's all kinds of research out there about what what nature does to the brain creatively, and so there's whole books about how being around bodies of water can help you out with that. So go, look at the water, walk around a pond or a lake if you can. Get out into nature, hear the birds, smell the air, feel the path, all that kind of stuff. Again, we're perhaps getting a little metaphysical on this, but the thought process is, get out of your whatever situation you're in when you're feeling stuck, right? So, like, I have a desk here. You've seen this backdrop a million times. This isn't a CGI backdrop. This is actually my office. This is where I spend tons and tons of times writing all kinds of things. And sometimes when you feel stuck, sometimes just a little movement of like getting up out of here, taking my laptop and going out to the green space outside of my apartment is enough to sort of jog that creative process. Other times, there's some walking trails around here. I'll go for a walk and let my mind just kind of wander. And frequently, it will sort of ravel the thing that's been keeping me all knotted up and tied down and feeling uncreative. So, just a change of space and a change of atmosphere. If you really want to get up and go work somewhere, highly recommend finding some place like a coffee shop. I know it's a little prosaic to go right to the coffee shop because everybody does that. But there's actually a reason why people do that, even though they may not be aware of it. There is a fair amount of research out there that suggests that that low level of ambient discussion, like people talking, but you're not really hearing what they're saying. Your mind is still actually processing those conversations. And it has been shown repeatedly to enhance creativity. So if you're on a time crunch, you just got to get something cranked out and you're not sure what to do and you're feeling really blank, legitimately either going to a coffee shop and sitting there and working in that kind of low grade burble, or jumping on YouTube and finding one of those sort of ambient coffee shop noise videos that has the conversations in it. The inaudible conversations are important. Can and has been shown to jog creativity. So just that change of space can make a huge difference in refilling your creative cup. So that's number two. And again, if you have any questions on that, or you've got any comments, or your own thought process on that, or you've got a special place that you like to go that makes you feel creative and reinvigorated when you're working on your TTRPG content, please toss that in the chat. Always love to hear from you guys on that. So the last thing, the third thing that I will typically do is experiment. And experiment is another part of this process, and it's perhaps the most active part of this. These are all active things. You'll notice these are all things that you should do to help refill your creative cup. The I find that sort of getting out of that writer's block space is not a passive thing. It doesn't just go away. It's almost like a physical block that I have to do something about moving. And experimenting is perhaps the most proactive version of this, because this is a time when I actually am writing, when I actually am creating something, but I'm not necessarily creating the thing that I have set out to create, right? This is time when I can be free form. This is time when I can sit down and play with things. And so there's a couple sort of experimental practices that I'll go through when I'm trying to come up with ideas, when I'm trying to spark that creative, well, spark within myself. Um, and these, I'm going to list them out as though they're isolated things, but frequently I'll kind of do all three of these things together or mix and match and blend them. So just for clarity's sake, I'm going to talk about them as though they're discrete, but really they're three things that you can kind of mash together and use all at once if you want to. And I frequently find it's very helpful to use all at once. The first one is play a game with yourself that I like to call What If? And effectively, it's just taking a bizarre situation and asking yourself, what if? What would happen if? You know, so uh, for example, what if it wasn't a dragon that kidnapped a princess? What if a princess kidnapped a dragon? Stuff like that. You take that what if that's kind of your situation, and you play it out. And you can take a mundane situation. What if a prince gets cursed by a witch? All right. Well, what if? What happens? What will happen if that occurs? And kind of let your mind run wild with that and let it run to more what if questions and follow those what if questions as they become interesting to you. If you run into one that you're like, that's dumb, I don't like it, ignore it. Find another what if question and you play out this tree of events until you come up with something that you're like, okay, yeah, I like that thought process. I think that's a cool place to now start an adventure or start a campaign, or that gives me an idea for something else that I might want to work on. It's a really helpful process, just that game of what if. Now, while I'm doing what if, I will frequently kind of come up with things that are odd pairings, which is the second little specific thing here. And odd pairings are I'll take two random things that are almost never together, or I haven't ever seen together, and I'll put them together and try to imagine what the heck that would be like. For example, I might say, well, I want an awakened boar who is also a knight. So okay, how would that work? What would that look like? How would that character function? Uh, and under what circumstances would that occur? Who would take this seriously? Who wouldn't take it seriously? Would this have to be part of a kingdom? Is this a knight errant? Is this somewhere out in the world that they knight themselves? Are they part of a larger organization? Were they always a boar? Were they something else previously? And I would just come up with this on pairing and try to explain to myself how this thing came to be, right? And again, I'm just kind of usually doing this all on paper for myself because I like to work on paper, but you can do this verbally if you really wanted to. But you're coming up with this odd pairing and you're coming up with an explanation for why it's not such an odd pairing, why it realistically and logically came together so that now it exists somewhere in the world. And all of that kind of backstory and an explanation and explorative process that you kind of go through that will frequently spark other ideas as well, because you'll get a lot of, well, if that happened, then this would also have had to have happened. And it will lead again down sort of these idea trees that you'll come up with all of these other little things that'll kind of grow out from that one singular thing. And then you just go back through and you find the ones that you like and just, circle them, mark them, whatever you want to do, and add them to your list, maybe journal about them a little bit. Yes, I'm serious about using the journal. Maybe journal about them a little bit, um, and just play. Let yourself play with those odd pairings. It's a good time to use the what if game as well. The third thing that I like to do when I'm experimenting is invert expectations. Now, you'll recall a few minutes ago, I was talking about playing the what if game, and I said, well, what if a princess kidnapped a dragon as opposed to a dragon kidnapping a princess, right? That's an example of inverting those expectations, where you're taking something that's a trope, something that happens all the time in stories. The dragon kidnapped the princess. We've all heard that story a million times. It's a fairy tale sort of trope. I'm not going to say that it's boring because you could make it exciting. You absolutely could. But what would happen if you flipped it? What if Now the princess is the bad guy, and the dragon is the victim in this. And you can do that with pretty much any trope that's out there, where you just kind of turn these things around. You take the expected and you flip it around so it becomes a little unexpected. And then you play that what if game again. What would happen if, instead of a witch cursing a prince, the prince cursed a witch? What would happen if, instead of, princess kissing a frog and he turns into a prince, she kisses the frog and she turns into a frog? You know, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really good one when you're like, have a list of just, writing prompts in front of you that are giving you no ideas and have made you not feel any more creative, which I feel like is always what happens to me. I'll go search for writing prompts and idea generators and things like that. And it'll give me all sorts of things to write about, or or TTRPG adventures to create. ChatGPT can pump out a list of this stuff, and none of it makes me feel any more inspired in a lot of times. But if I take the tropes that it spits out and I flip them on their heads and then play what if, well, now strange things come out of it. And strange things are always fun to write about, and they make good adventures. So doing sort of those either on pairings or those inverted expectations are really good ways to experiment and play and find things that might excite you. Now, I said that there were going to be 3 things that I like to do to get out of writer's block, and they are. These are 3 things that I like to do to get out of writer's block that really help me and have helped me in the past. But there is a 4th thing that you can do, and it's something that we do every Monday on this channel, and that is collaborate with other writers. So as a DM, sometimes just working with and around another GM while you're working on your own separate adventures and bouncing ideas off of each other is a great way to get out of a creative slump. It's a great way to kind of get over your writer's block, because as you're doing some of these other things, specifically as you're doing some of your experimentation and tossing out your thoughts to another GM, and they're doing the same to you, and you're playing racquetball or tennis or whatever ball slash paddle sport you want to call this, ping pong maybe, as you're doing that together with your ideas, new things are going to spark out for both of you. That's the premise of like writers groups, and creative fiction writers will frequently work in groups like that to help kind of get out of their own heads and spark some of that creative thought. And I think it's a great practice for DMs and GMs alike. I know that I've found it helpful on our Monday night live streams while we're working on our ongoing campaigns on there. We're building out our domain of dread and working on Darkport, our town. That getting that creative input from other GMs like yourselves really helps ensure that I don't run into writer's block when we're doing those things. It can be a huge, huge help just to have another brain in the room to paddleboard some ideas around with. Anyway, that's 3 of my favorite things to do when I am faced with writer's block, and one extra little bonus thing that you can always do, and always feel free to come join us on Monday evenings when we're doing our live stream Let's Write an Adventure, where we're creating a domain of dread and a campaign in real time and working through the creative process step by step, live and with your input. All of that is a great way to overcome your writer's block, journaling, getting away from your desk. The Artist Way calls that going on artist dates. So call it what you will, but getting out and about and experimenting, and then always being able to work with your fellow GMs. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any other comments or questions, please toss them in the chat. I'd love to chat with you guys about all this if you have any thoughts. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you've enjoyed this video. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow. And please be sure to come back on Wednesdays. We'll be back again this coming Wednesday, which is the 22nd, with another topic. Always looking for new topics for this. So if there's something you want me to chat about, or there's something you'd like me to discuss on here, please shoot me a note. Either drop me a comment or send me an email at rjcurrer@gmail.com, and I would be happy to talk about any of that kind of stuff. Anyway, thanks again for joining this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next time, or hopefully even on Monday at our live stream there. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.